This episode is brought to you by a brand new online discussion forum for documentary film enthusiasts, or really anyone curious about the world. The Walt, aka Watch and Learn Theater, is a free online community and discussion forum that's delivered straight to your email inbox or the Substack app. But for $5 a month, you get access to the back catalog, bonus content, and input on future documentary film recommendations. Sign up at thewalt.substack.com and we can watch and learn together.
Hi, Mary.
Full of grace! Full of grace! See? She's talking.
It could be a real miracle. A real miracle, me mama.
Full of grace! You think so, Pecker?
I do.
Oh, I was blinded by the blue of Mary's cloak when I was just 7 years old. I've been praying to her ever since.
Sure has paid off, hasn't it?
It sure has. Full of grace! We hear you loud and clear, Mary.
You know what? Why don't you two sit over there? Perfect. Oh, wow. You two look just like a holy card.
We do?
Oh, just wait till you see this picture.
Full of grace! She likes you, Pecker.
Oh, and I like her too.
Full of grace! Full of grace! Full of grace!
Sequel. Reboot. Which one will it be? It's the Ruined Childhood Podcast.
Greetings, Starfighters, Crab Claw Crackers, and Pit Beef Barbecuers. This is Ruined Childhoods. Last time we were in the bedroomed in Maine, and on this episode we're bopping down the East Coast to the Old Line State. Have you ever been a president visiting Camp David? You've been here. Are you the Star-Spangled Banner? You were written here. And are you Cisco? You just may have seen your first thong and sang your first song here. Annapolis is the capital, Fort McHenry is its most popular tourist attraction, and Baltimore is its most populous city, and also the setting for this week's movie. That's right, we are in Maryland, celebrating the 1998 John Waters comedy, Pecker. Dan, before I introduce our guest, I need to know, are you full of grace?
John, I am full of grace, pit beef, pubic hair, and Pecker, and just excitement to talk about Baltimore.
Pubic hair is illegal, Dan. Our first guest is somebody I've been actually following on social media for probably well over a decade. Back in the days when Twitter was fun and called Twitter, our guest went by Maryland Mudflap and wasn't only super funny, but also very kind. He would randomly ask strangers for their mailing addresses and send physical postcards to those who responded. And I got one once, and it made my day when that happened. And it turns out that the guy behind that anonymous Twitter account was television and film writer Scotty Landes, who now also co-hosts one of my favorite podcasts, Bananas. I'm holding up my Bananas koozie right now.
And I'm wearing my banana socks.
And as far as I'm concerned, he's the best in the biz. Yeah. Scotty, thanks for joining us to talk Maryland movies and Pecker.
I could not be happier to talk about Maryland, what I consider a top 10 state in the United States. And I love John Waters. And I really love Pecker. I find that it's one of his most watchable movies that you can understand what's happening the entire way through.
Yeah, and we're going to definitely dig way more into Pecker. I got to say, as I was getting ready for this podcast, I looked to see what other podcasts were talking about Pecker, and there were only a couple, and nobody seemed to like it. And I was like, what's wrong with you people? This movie's so damn fun.
Everything is wrong with them. And but we're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus on how great Pecker is and how awesome John Waters is.
It is great, though. It's I think that the performances are all really fun and good. Like, there's so many fun actors in there. And I thought, Ed Furlong was good as Pecker. I was like, I liked this guy.
He's fun. I just rewatched Terminator 2 because I was just, feeling the Furlong. And it's like, man, he really brings it. I know that, American History X was the same year as Pecker. And when you see him show up in things, it's just like, good, there he is. He's doing it.
Talk about talk about polar opposite characters. You from a neo-Nazi to Pecker, this who sees the best
sweetest
in
little
everything,
boy.
and the sweetest little boy.
It's really true. And he's like, I think one of the reasons that people might not like John Waters' films, even films like Pecker and Serial Mom that are a little more mainstream, is because even those movies, they take times just to have fun, silly scenes.
Yeah.
They have asides and jokes and non sequiturs that are purely for pure John Waters lovers. And so the movies don't like build, and you don't feel that sort of like, oh, this is the midpoint and this is the second midpoint and now we're entering act 3 and there's this big finale. It's more about like this hangout with these weirdo characters. But Pecker also has a story, and like it's also great. He gets plucked from obscurity. I'm sure it was slightly autobiographical for John, and he starts to lose track of what matters to him, and then he has to win it all back. I love it. I was so happy to watch it again.
Yeah.
I remember when they were filming it in Maryland when I was a kid, and I remember people.
Okay, let's talk about
extras.
that.
Yeah.
Before we like go deep into Pecker, which is a fun sentence to say.
That's right. Hard to do.
Okay, so how long were you living in Maryland?
I lived there until I went to college. So I was born in Towson. My uncle Chris went to high school with John Waters at the same time.
No shit.
But I am born and raised Maryland, and I left around 2000 to go to college.
Wow. Okay. So you remember this being filmed at the time? I mean, it was just it was while you were in high school, theoretically.
Yes. It was. I remember knowing about John Waters in the 90s, just trying to be cool. Just grunge era was taking off, and I can remember Hairspray was sort of always around that, and Pink Flamingos and the plastic Pink Flamingos are still around Baltimore all the time. So I was aware of him, but I remember them shooting this. I remember hiring people going and being extras, even like kids my age. And I also remember the trailer in theaters and thinking Pecker was a really funny title for a movie as a young boy.
It being marketed as John Waters Pecker.
John Waters Pecker.
Right.
Of course.
Well, kind of going back to what you were saying earlier about maybe people finding this movie, not sitting well with them. I think that what you have to do when you watch a movie like this, and really any John Waters movie, is to like put yourself into a John Waters mindset, where you know that like this is going to be a movie where the downtrodden and the filthy are celebrated, and it has a very anti-establishment sentiment, essentially.
It does.
And you have to just you have to forget everything about like, Hollywood movies. And, before this one, Serial Mom came out, and I feel like that's where it was just like, okay, we're getting more high profile actors. We got Kathleen Turner, and we're blending them in with like the Mink Stoles of the John Waters world, and the Patricia Hearsts and things like that.
It was cool. I think that's why it works. And if you've ever listened to a John Waters audible, like if you've ever listened to his audiobooks and when he reads his own books, like then you go back and watch his movies, you can hear his voice so much. Like Christina Ricci has a line in Pecker where she's like talking about how she should be back at the laundromat and that you don't know her customers, kind of when they're at the nightclub at like the Bee Cafe in New York after Pecker's big successful show. And then she's like, you don't understand my customers. She's like, they're probably pissing in the machines. And I'm like, you can just hear John Waters typing it and hearing it in his own head being said. So I laughed twice as hard knowing what he's doing.
Right.
That's funny. Yeah. There's a lot of lines. I feel like, she has the dialogue, and I love another thing I love about Pecker, and he doesn't do this as much in his other films, but having those visual effects as she's talking about, the piss stains,
the beauty
the skid
of
marks and all
best.
that.
Yeah.
And it's all art. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's so much fun. I keep on wanting to like take a beat before getting into the movie. It's so hard to do that. But I just want to know also just about like living in Maryland.
Sure.
And, of course there were John Waters movies being made. When Dan and I were trying to decide what movie to cover for the state of Maryland, Barry Levinson was kind of like neck and neck. And we were talking about Tin Men and Diner. And I'd also love to know, for you, of course, John Waters is one filmmaker, but for you as somebody who's like a writer, how aware were you of some of the other productions that were happening in the state at the time?
I was a little bit aware, but it was, I knew a lot of people that were extras when they did I think it was Gene Hackman, Keanu Reeves, maybe The Replacements. I think that's what it was called, the football player where the league was on strike. They shot that in Maryland, and a lot of people, including my brother-in-law, were extras where they would just go sit and be fans, and they'd rotate you and they'd pay you. And it was like, a 4-week job or whatever just to sit and be like, yay. So I knew a little bit. I had one friend in high school whose dad was an actor named Terry O'Quinn, who was John Locke on Lost, and he's a great actor, great character actor. So I would stay at their house and party at their house, and spend the night over there. So we weren't completely removed. My family has nothing to do with the industry whatsoever. My parents weren't in the biz or anything like that, but it was around, and I think it's because Baltimore is an art town. There's a good music scene, there's a good art scene, there's a good theater scene. And also, we're between D.C. and New York, so there's a lot of political thrillers. New York, obviously, is New York. So you're close. You're always within 150 miles of films being made, basically.
Philadelphia, also super close. Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any, I guess, The Replacements being one, but were there other movies maybe where you were perhaps a little bit closer to it? Maybe you were in consideration for being an extra. Did that ever happen?
Yes. When I was 21, I went and auditioned for the movie Annapolis, of which was a Tyrese, Jordana Brewster,
is that James Franco?
And James Franco.
Yeah.
And I got hired as it was basically a principal extra, which is a little different than extra, where I had to go to Philadelphia. They shot it in Philly, and go to a week of boot camp, and they were going to shave our heads. And then, as opposed to just being an extra, I was going to be in charge of a group of extras, that a little platoon or whatever. So I had to get 3 different fittings of your navy whites and your whatevers. And then on the second day of boot camp, driving up from Baltimore to Philly in the morning, and then it was at some old armory, and you'd check in, and then they would treat you like you had to do push-ups, and you had to fall into formation and learn how to you had to learn how to march, and we had to run kind of wimpy, crappy obstacle courses. But the best was so I had to kind of be yell stuff, and they'd yell stuff back. And Tyrese comes over, and I didn't know Tyrese. I thought Tyrese was a singer or an R&B singer. I didn't know that he was an actor really at that point. And he was in character. He was trying to be method, I'm training military recruits. You guys are a bunch of plebes. And he was screaming at the extras who were getting $86 a day or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And he was and so I laughed because he was yelling at women, just yelling at a woman that probably lived nearby in Philadelphia that just needed a paycheck and thought it'd be cool to be in a movie. And he saw me laugh, but I didn't laugh ha ha ha. I just kind of went, psh. And he just singled me out. And he knew I was one of the slightly elevated roles. And he's like, I see you laughing. I see you smirking. I see you smirking back there. You're not going to ruin this for me. When I say 10, oh God, what did he have to say? But then he was like, I want you to put your thumb on the seam of your pants. And when I say this, I want you to cock and drive your heel in. And he was yelling specifically at me, which made me laugh even more. And so then we were eating lunch one day, and they had cameras set up, and one at a time they were taking extras, specifically extras, to go get their head shaved. And I was like, oh, cool. This is when I'll get on camera, the single on my face. Yeah. And everybody that knows me will be like, there's Scotty. And then I saw a parade, one of probably the second AD clearly was that guy's got an afro, that guy's got a redhead afro, that guy's got a mohawk, and they were shaving heads. And I realized that me with a very normal white guy number 4 haircut was never going to make the cut. And then between getting yelled at by Tyrese and waking up every morning at 4:30 a.m. to drive, and that, I was why am I doing this? I don't even want to be an actor. Like, if I had any aspirations to be an actor, I would have stuck with it. So I just finished out the day, signed out, drove back, and just never went again. And there was one wide shot, I guess, in some point in the movie where they were shooting us like training in the boot camp in gray sweatpants or whatever. And apparently somebody saw me in it once and was like, "Was that you?" And I was like, "I don't think so. I don't think it was." So that was my experience on Annapolis. I got the paycheck. And
you got a free lunch.
Yeah.
You honorably discharged yourself.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I was happy to leave with all my, they shaved my head because I did stay at the end of the day and I didn't get on camera.
Free haircut.
A free haircut. Yeah. The only other one that I should mention is Blair Witch. Blair Witch was when I was in high school, and we thought it was real because they released it in Baltimore first. And so we thought nobody had ever seen found footage in my friend group, and they played it, I think, at the Charles Theater. And people were crying and screaming. And I know a girl whose father was a powerful lawyer in Baltimore, and she ran out in the middle of the thing and called her dad and said, "You have to call the police. These people are missing." And we all left not knowing if it was real or not.
Right.
Wasn't that wild?
It's
That
the
was
best.
such a wild time. That was amazing.
It's the
I
best.
remember hearing about it when it first came out and hearing about similar stories, if not that actual story. But yeah, and then people said, no, they found these VHS tapes in the woods.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Also, I went back and watched it last year, and the setup of that movie where they're just talking to local people in Burkittsville, and they those are just regular people, and they're excellent. Those like locals, the way they tee up, like, I don't know, kids used to go up there, and there was a woman, and all these things were covered in fur, and they would stand them in the corner. Like, they do it in this really smart way where they do set up the horrific finale, but they're so casual in Maryland about it, and it's the best.
You know, I haven't watched it since the first time, and I haven't watched it since the first time, and I know that, like, if I go back, I'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, all right, we were being prepared for that. Yeah. Ooh.
It's really good, and it holds up. It's still so scary. If anything, they're meaner to the woman character, who I think is Michelle, but they're meaner to her than I remembered. Like, they're really being shitty to her. Which is good. It creates this even greater tension. Like, I didn't realize back then how much they were like bullying her and thought she was an idiot because she's the director. But the one thing I will say is the grassroots campaign of that. I know there was some stuff online, but personally, I went fishing about a year before out near Harper's Ferry. So I was near where Blair and Burkittsville and all that's supposed to be. I was in that part of sort of Appalachia. And went inside. My friend was driving. I went inside a little gas station to get a Coke for both of us, and on a chalkboard it said, "Beware of the Blair Witch." So I think that they had been sending people out to just write like, "Hey, can we do this?" And so I'd heard of the Blair Witch a year ahead of time without knowing what it was. I mentioned it to my friend Jason. He was like, "Yeah, I don't know what the hell that is." So they were planting seeds like. You can't do it today with the internet.
No, absolutely not. That's too bad. I feel like the closest that we get to that kind of like amazing marketing is like, oh, did Harry Styles spit on Chris Pine? Like, it's things like that where it's just like, that's the best we're going to get for a while now that we have the internet, I guess, because you're not going to get that Blair Witch magic anymore.
No, it was a special time. But yeah, I was aware of filming. It didn't feel impossible. I'm sure it's part of the reason I ended up being a screenwriter is it didn't feel so far away.
And I know that, clearly the Machine isn't set in Maryland. Where was Ma set?
It was set in Maryland, and I don't know why they changed it. I wrote it about my high school, Franklin High, and they put it in Ohio for absolutely no reason because they shot it in Mississippi. So I don't know if somebody was making creative decisions to try to get writing credits on the script, but something happened where I wrote it from my high school experience of going to parties and hanging out in minivans. And so it was set in Maryland. It was supposed to take place at my high school.
Have you written other things that have been set there?
I do
Yeah.
put a lot of I've done 2 pilots that didn't get picked up to series. One was about kids that go to Maryland Institute College of Art, and
Oh, cool.
that one I wrote years ago, and I thought it was great because I had friends that did go to MICA, and they were all such great, wonderful weirdos. I just thought it was a great world. And then I have a pitch that I'm going to take out this year that it's in a mid-Atlantic small town, but I'm not going to name it, but it's going to be in Maryland. It won't say Maryland specifically, but I like the fun of being like, could be Pennsylvania, could be Delaware. So yeah, I have enough Maryland pride to put stuff in.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, shall we dive into Pecker a little bit more?
I'd love to.
Why don't I give a little synopsis for anybody who perhaps hasn't seen it? Because it's not easy to find or to watch. So for anybody who's unfamiliar with Pecker, Pecker is a teenager with a deep admiration for his corner of Baltimore and demonstrates his natural photographic talents by showing his work at the sandwich shop where he works part-time. His favorite subjects are his neighbors and strangers, both willing and unaware, his shoplifting best friend Matt, laundromat-owning girlfriend Shelley, and his loving and supportive family. His mom runs the thrift store, where the unhoused go to feel attractive and important. His father owns a bar that's doing poorly thanks to a new nearby strip club that shows illegal pubic hair. Pecker also has 2 sisters. Little Chrissy is addicted to sugar, and
Yes.
Tina works at a bar that caters to gay men and features male dancers in their tighty whities. Pecker also lives with his me mama, who spends her days slinging pit beef sandwiches and communicating with a particularly chatty statue of the Virgin Mary. Scotty, we're going to come back to pit beef sandwiches. I've got questions for you about that.
Oh yeah, it's delicious.
When Pecker's work is seen by Rory, a New York gallerist, she is immediately taken by his vision and offers Pecker a show at her gallery. The art world goes wild for Pecker's vision of Baltimore, and he becomes the biggest name in street photography. However, Pecker's overnight fame isn't received well by the subjects of his photos. Not only do critics see them as ghouls, but they are now aware of how they could be seen by outsiders. Matt's shoplifting career is in jeopardy. Shelley's laundromat is attracting creeps. Little Chrissy's ADHD is called out, and Tina's bar gets outed as a venue for the forbidden act of public teabagging, despite Tina's best efforts to keep the dancers in line. We'll come back to that too. But what the art world doesn't expect is for Pecker to turn down a show at the Whitney to protect and honor the value of his quaint and quirky Baltimore neighborhood. Want to talk really quick about teabagging. Did you know? Okay, so Scotty, something that we love on this podcast is how movies have kind of created a legacy of their own in terms of like either coined or popularized like words or phrases.
Of course, yeah, sure.
And teabagging was, you know, a subculture kind of a thing that existed before Pecker, but Pecker is what got it out into the world.
Great.
And now it's been embraced by like the video game community, which
Is that true?
Didn't realize. Yeah, I guess in the game Halo, it's like something that you do is you teabag people.
Fun.
And it's kind of lived on from there. So it all kind of
What's the button combination to teabag, though?
That's right.
Jeez.
It's so funny. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like a legacy that John would be proud of, I think.
100%. Absolutely.
Didn't you
And
think?
how great?
Sorry, Dan.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. I was just saying, how great is Martha Plimpton in
Amazing.
this? Yeah,
I didn't even
She's the
recognize her until there's a take where she looks directly into camera and yells something, and I was like, oh, it's Martha Plimpton.
It's maybe one of my favorite roles of hers, and she has so many good ones. But
What I was going to say is like Pecker. So for those who haven't seen it, Pecker walks around with like a little 35 millimeter camera, and especially in the intro, and is just constantly shooting photos of everybody, mostly candids. And it's really funny. And then they show so many of them in the galleries or in newspapers. And there were so many framed photos in this movie that I was like, I want that. I was Googling I was on my phone the entire time watching the movie, trying to find the original frames. And I'm sure John has them because John takes a Polaroid photo of every single person that comes into his house. Everybody. It doesn't matter if you're Leonardo DiCaprio. It doesn't matter if you're the mayor. It doesn't matter if you're the plumber or the guy doing tree work. And I was lucky enough to go over there for a Christmas party, and I got a picture. He has a Polaroid camera, and he's like stops you right when you walk in, and he takes a photo of you. And I was with my friend Carl, so it was one of me and then one of me with Carl. And he just when film cameras started going away a lot because of digital cameras, I know he bought like tons of Polaroid film just so he could keep it going. And he has certain rooms in his house, like on the third floor of his house, he has this one room where he just has some of his favorite ones, and it'll be like he and Tracy Lords on a Polaroid. There was one that was Leonardo DiCaprio and like Mark Wahlberg. But when he got cool, when John Waters somehow became sort of mainstream cool, when indie film became cool, you could see like from his parties and people coming over, he has this collection of photographs that is one day going to be the thing where you have to probably pay like $500 just to look at them for an hour.
Oh,
it's amazing.
Yeah.
He'll have a show at the Whitney.
Yeah, I wish. And so the whole time I'm like, there's a teabagging shot, which is like tighty-whitey and like nuts in a guy's face from the side. And I was trying to find the original. I want that prop so bad.
How great would that be?
Oh, because that guy looks so happy in that picture too. Like he's just in heaven with those balls on his forehead.
I also love the little Chrissy with the sugar. That's so good.
It's great. Then she becomes a vegan for a while.
So
it's great.
I was thinking, and I've been vegan for almost 15 years. This may have been the first time I heard the word vegan was from this movie.
So it hit you. You were a young man when this came out, and it really affected you.
The seed was planted.
Yeah.
I mean, who knew?
Yes.
Little Chrissy.
And I love Christina Ricci. She was in that in between phase where people are like, is she gonna be a child actor or is she gonna have an adult career? And like, what a perfect role for her. And she's good in it. She's good in everything, but she's so really good in this movie.
Yeah. Mary Kay Place, so good.
I think this was also the same year for Christina Ricci as The Opposite of Sex, which was also it was kind of her like, no, I am not. This is not Casper anymore.
Right. I'm not Wednesday.
I'm not a child. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think that she was 18 when this came out, something like that. I mean, yeah, what a fascinating transition.
She's the
and then
best.
Black Snake Moan comes out shortly after, I believe, and yeah.
They're all, I mean, yeah, just the cast across the board from the name actors to people like I love Outsider Al and Miss Betty.
Mm-hmm.
Those performers.
Oh, they're wonderful.
Yeah.
Brandon Sexton III. We all love Brandon Sexton III as Matt, the shoplifting best friend.
Anybody who loves 1996 through 1999 cinema must love Brandon Sexton III.
Well, I looked at it, and he is very active.
Yes, he still works.
Working constantly, yeah. So you might not recognize him anymore, but playing a shoplifter at this time in his life did him
this
some
and
good.
Welcome to the Dollhouse, that was like this was his time.
Yes.
Yeah, the Brandon Sexton III trilogy of Welcome to the Dollhouse, Pecker, and Empire Records.
I
feel like needs to be a box set.
Another twerpy klepto. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, John's such a it's cool. Like I said, just hearing his voice when you watch his movies, there's like a double level of enjoyment where you're like watching him. Also, if you've seen his live show, he'll talk about dingleberries to this day. Like he'll be like, we aren't saying this enough. And I know that he had a Christmas movie. I've heard him mention in interviews before called Fruitcake. He's been trying to get off the ground. Mm-hmm. How hasn't somebody just given him $5 million to go shoot Fruitcake, the Christmas movie?
So actually, Scotty, I know that you and Kurt did Banana's show at the Aladdin Theater where I live in Portland. And every Christmas or like a day or two around Christmas, John Waters has a show at that theater. And it's like a Christmas show, which always surprises me. It's just like, what are you doing here now? Okay, sure.
It's a great theater. Yeah. It's big enough.
Yeah.
It's like the perfect size where if you can fill the top and the balcony, or the balcony and the floor seats, you feel like you have a big audience, but it's also not.
And it's just
1,000
It's just
people.
grungy enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also just like, it's not pristine. It's John Waters level of grime.
Yeah, it's the best. It's and there's like a lot of cutaway shots where he does a lot of like singles on like the sign that says Hamden, or he does represent Baltimore so well, and like all the names of the restaurants, like the Sub Pit, and there's like a crab place behind
the Claw Machine.
Yeah, the Claw Machine.
Yeah.
You're like, this is great. They don't exist, but they should exist in Baltimore.
The Pelt Room.
The Pelt Room.
The lesbian the strip scenes are so great where she's just insulting all the guys and they love it.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
That's so John Waters too, where it's just like it's embracing filth.
Yes.
It's just like, yeah, you know
Celebrating.
that you're filthy and you know that you love it. Yeah.
There's the dad's bar. I forget the name of the dad's bar, but
That was the claw machine.
That was the claw machine. Okay. So in Maryland, after I believe World War II, but it might have been the Korean War, as sort of a way to help vets make money coming back from war, they allowed you to build basement bars for a very short amount of time. And they licensed them, and that bar looks so much like these bars. And there's one man who he must have died because he was in his 90s, but he was the last guy going who still had a Maryland basement bar where you could have a full cash bar. And this one dude somewhere in Maryland still had one up until like a few years ago. But I even think John showing the claw machine, it was sort of a basement feeling bar with like wood
It's
panels.
got the drop ceilings.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that feels very Baltimore and very Maryland to me, where it was like, hey, guys, if you want to make some extra money after you get off the shift and bartend in your basement, you're legally allowed to do it. And how did that go away? That would be the most popular thing in the world right now.
It would be so niche.
Regulations.
Such a such a classy thing to do.
Dan, were you gonna say something before?
So actually, I'm going to come back to it in a little bit because because as we're talking about like, you know, quintessentially Baltimore things, we need to come back to pit beef.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need to know more about all of Baltimore loves a pit beef sandwich, according to me, Mama. So
Yes, it's true. And they're actually delicious. So, John, you might not enjoy it. I don't think there is a suitable
It's okay.
vegan option.
I can hear people talk about pit beef. It's fine.
So pit beef is everywhere in Maryland, and when you live there, you don't realize it's nowhere else. It's roast beef. I think it's like a top round that is cooked over charcoal, and then they cook it like they do anything else, where you can get it a little rarer, you can get a little more well done, and they slice it pretty thin. They put it on what in Maryland they call a Kaiser roll. Some places like Massachusetts they call it a bulky roll, but basically you get it on either a potato bun or a Kaiser roll. And then if you're, to me, like a purist, you put horseradish and white onion on it. And then every pit beef place that's like an establishment has like 2 or 3 sauces. They'll have a barbecue sauce, they'll have like a tiger sauce, and then they'll have their proprietary sauce. And then it's delicious. It's incredibly delicious. But the cool thing about Pecker is if you drive like north of where my parents, they still live in Maryland, towards the Pennsylvania border, you'll pass churches that on Sundays, they have signs out that say pit beef as a fundraiser, and you pull into a parking lot and a few old people are sitting there and the old guy will get up and he'll carve you pit beef. So what she was doing, what the grandma was doing is 100% accurate. People will sell like small side of the road pit beef stands, plus then they have restaurants. But I've personally in the last year stopped at a little place on the side of the road and it's like a pit beef sandwich, $8, and it's a fundraiser and it's 3 old people. It's fantastic. It's so good.
Yeah, I think that me mama, the way that we saw her prepare it was on like white bread, but with horseradish.
It's so good.
That was part of it. Yeah, we only
Horseradish,
see
white
one.
onion, and then whatever sauce you like on it, and it is delicious.
But also, according to me mama, sometimes there's things more important than pit beef. That's what she says when they're going up to see the see
Virgin Mary, yeah, full of grace. That's right.
Oh God, that actress, I forget what her name is. She's so good.
Yeah.
She's so
She's
perfect
sweet.
for that role.
Yeah, what a fun runner. What a dumb sea story of like she's a ventriloquist for a rubber mouth Virgin Mary statue that starts talking. Spoilers. It's like so fun.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's Jean Shirtler, by the way, who
Jean Shirtler.
Rest in
go ahead and
peace,
assume
beautiful
is no longer with us.
Jean Shirtler. Unless she's like
Yeah.
110, Jean Shirtler.
Bravo then.
Bravo.
Yeah.
She really was full of grace.
Well, when I looked at
Seriously.
like her list of credits, it seemed like she got into acting late in life and just kind of knocked out a few things. I think she might have done one other John Waters film. Dana, you might have her thing up right now. I think she was also in like Runaway Bride or something like that.
He seemed to have his ensemble of characters that he would plug and play. There's some people
Yeah.
popped up all over. And
Yeah,
Stacy
Mink Stoll,
Keebler.
Patricia Hearst.
One time is the blonde on the bus who
Right.
turned out to be like a model and dancer and dated George Clooney and married some tech gazillionaire. I was like,
She was a
Stacey
wrestler.
Keebler? She was a wrestler?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, I also
WWE.
love the Cindy Sherman cameo. I felt like that's kind of like giving it a little bit of like, okay, this is the art world and the photography world putting their stamp of approval on this movie being made, you know, to actually include somebody like Cindy Sherman, who's awesome and weird herself.
I love it. I actually think that this one they could remake, like the way that the nostalgia, the Gen Z nostalgia and shows like 13 Reasons Why, where people are listening to cassette tapes and Stranger Things in every way is so nostalgia porn. Just, I think you could have a character named Pecker that walked around with his camera, and if you just made it like a procedural, you just made it like, they were like helping solve Baltimore cases of the week. I feel like you could do a Stranger Things type of series based on Pecker pretty easily.
There you go.
You know, Scotty, that's something that we do on this show is we kind of imagine how a legacy of a movie could live on. That's kind of the idea of a ruined childhood. It's when there's a remake of something, everyone cries, my childhood is ruined. I don't know if anybody would say that for Pecker, but who's to say? So love your idea of
It would be a good show.
revisiting it.
It's like a 35 millimeter, you know, it's just the joy of waiting for film to develop is such a lost gift.
Yeah. Well, at the time that this came out, I mean, I was in high school and I was taking photography classes.
too.
I did that a little bit into college. And, you know, also being like a kid who loved shopping at thrift stores. And,
too.
you know, I just felt like I identified so much with Pecker. And it's kind of a reason why this movie spoke to me so much when I was younger. And I think that I was probably about 14 when I first saw Pink Flamingos and became aware of John Waters. And like once that happened, it was just like off to the races.
Yes.
And this movie came out and it was I don't know. I just felt like, a movie made for me. This is great.
I get that. It's a hang. It's a vibe movie. It has a real feel to it more than anything else. It's like if you like the feeling of this movie, it's great. Also, how long is this movie? An hour and 30 minutes exactly? Hour 25?
Exactly.
It motors.
It's brisk.
Yeah, I paused it to like get up and do the laundry, like switch the laundry over, and I came back and like hit the button. I was like, oh, there's like 20 minutes left? I was like, oh, God, this movie's flying.
Yeah, the pelt room had already been closed.
Well, that's one of the things I appreciate about it. It doesn't take him that long to realize that all like, you know, the New York art world people are all fake and that, you know, he's going to turn the tables on them. And I like that. He kind of, he sees what's up because he's natural. That's who he is. He sees the things that other people don't see. And he also like takes action. That's what he does. Such a nice character.
Yeah, Pecker's a good guy.
person.
We like Pecker.
We like Pecker. And also, we haven't talked about Lily Taylor, who plays Rory, his, I guess, manager. And I don't know. I love Lily Taylor.
Me too.
We've talked about her on the podcast a lot. And this is such a different
Having a
type
moment
of role.
here.
Yeah, totally.
Well, this was
Yeah,
like, I
and-
feel like the post I Shot Andy Warhol, like
Right.
boom, where people really started to recognize her talents. And
Yeah.
can't think of what I know. I know after the year after this was The Haunting, and we don't need to, bring that into it. But she's fantastic. She's wonderful in here as the gallery owner, gallerist.
Yes, Rory. Yeah,
Gallerist, yeah.
She was,
But
cool.
she, I mean, shortly after this also we see her in High Fidelity. And, on this podcast, we've talked about her in Mystic Pizza. And we haven't talked about Say Anything. But she's so good in
she
that.
was, yeah.
What a run. Yeah, she seems to do a lot of scary movies
great.
these days. it's just to be a working actor. Like, seeing it now, seeing so many of my peers who are actors, like, to be able to say, hey, I was in a movie that was in theaters every year for 26 years. You're like, you what? It seems so far gone. It seems impossible. So when you see somebody like that, they're like, oh, they were in 3 movies that were in theaters every year, and they were always good. Like, bravo, Lily. She nailed it.
Yeah.
I was looking at the filmography for, and I don't remember his name, but the guy who does play the dad, and he was in like 4 movies a year at least.
Yeah,
like
amazing.
for like
Yeah.
15 years.
Mark Joy.
Oh,
Mark
Mark
Joy.
Joy.
I remember yes. Mark Joy.
Yeah.
Great name. Good
Dude
stage
worked.
name too.
Great name.
wonderful. And he's so good in this role. Oh my God. His fixation on the legality of showing pubic hair is just amazing.
I love how he's talking about like at the after party for the showing in New York, and he's like, "So, is it legal to show pubic hair in New York?" Like, that's his icebreaker. That's his icebreaker. Love him.
Yeah.
He's the best.
Love him. Something I was thinking about in looking at this movie when it comes out, and also just looking at my fandom of John Waters, and it kind of, this was the last movie of his. After this, I remember watching Cecil B. Demented,
Yes.
and A Dirty Shame, and feeling like, it's kind of like he's trying. It felt more, but I have perspective on that, because I was thinking about like, okay, well, what changed? And then it occurred to me like, all right, well, 1998, There's Something About Mary comes out, and like the cum in the hair gag is totally something that John Waters would have been doing 20 years earlier.
Yes.
So it's kind of like all of a sudden other people are doing, kind of the grossness, but without the I guess the same joy that he did it with. So I just kind of wanted to get your takes on that, and like, how do you feel like that, those that kind of like, gross out humor that, Something About Mary really helped kind of break through.
Zipped his
like,
ball up in his that's a really I think you just nailed it. I think John probably did move the needle and moved it and affected it in a way that you could get away with more stuff. Where it's also like Weird Al Yankovic. I think about him more than the average person, because I remember him.
No, you don't. Not in this conversation.
not
Okay.
in this room.
Well, we might not be the average person. But like, he was Weird Al, and now what he is not weird at all. So like, he's just stayed around long enough where it's just like, then you have the Tim and Eric awesome shows, and you have like, Geico making zany commercials, and now it's just like, hey, that's just regular Al Yankovic. He's just he's got a cool personality, but like in the 80s he was weird and wacky.
Yeah.
And I think John did the same thing, where it's like, we've gone from Divine eating a dog turd in Pink Flamingos to Two Girls, One Cup, and then now whatever we see, we're like, honestly, this sounds boring and I don't need to see this anymore. I think he was a true indie writer and director who did move the needle. But I think your point, Dan, about Something About Mary, it's very John Waters-esque. A lot of the Farrelly Brothers movies are now that Kingpin, if that was in Baltimore, it would have been called Duckpin, and it would have been great.
Yeah, I think that another thing that needs to be mentioned while talking about John Waters and his influence is also like trauma films.
Yeah, sure.
Scott, were you really into the trauma movies? I called you Scott, not Scotty. That's felt weird.
Okay.
Were you into the trauma movies?
Let me do one thing, because I'm going to show you. That's a great question, and I have a new office. I'm going to show you something real quick. Give me 1 second.
Oh, wonderful.
Exciting.
So yeah, I was into the trauma films, and I had an opportunity to have dinner with Lloyd Kaufman, and he gave me a Toxic Avengers poster, but he signed it, and it says, "Yo, Scotty, stay toxic, XO Lloyd Kaufman, aka Uncle Lloydie." And so I'm waiting for a frame for this.
Beautiful.
The girl I was dating at the time, we went together to meet Lloyd and his wife, and she didn't understand why I was so starstruck, because I've met so many people. I was working in TV already. I was like writing TV shows and writing movies, but to meet Lloyd Kaufman for dinner, I was like, I was just a deer in the headlights.
How did that happen?
It was like somebody knew how much I liked trauma films, and he was in town, and he was trying to meet younger people, like actors and writers, basically probably to exploit them in the way that trauma does, like, get them to work for no money and endless.
Right.
and the woman I was dating was an actress. I was like a new writer out here, and so like somebody told Lloyd, you should meet these two, and we went, and we were in West Hollywood, and we laughed, and there's a photo of me, and we're like, our heads are together, and we're hugging each other and smiling, and I'm like, got to get this framed. So yeah, the trauma, John Waters effect, and also me just being from Baltimore County and just north of Baltimore, it had a humongous impact on the way I approach all comedy writing.
Yeah. Did you read Lloyd's book, All I Need to Know About Filmmaking I Learned from the Toxic Avenger? I'm sure you did. I loved that book. That was so good.
It's great.
Yeah. So when I was about to graduate from high school in 2001, I actually had an internship lined up at Troma.
Whoa.
And I remember like going to Hell's Kitchen, going to the
Yeah.
Troma office, and like seeing all of the props and everything there. And Lloyd was there, and I met Lloyd. And unfortunately, like, I think that there was a big shift going on at the time. I think a bunch of people left and started their own thing.
Yes.
And so the internship fell flat, didn't happen. But at least I got to go to the office. At least I got to maybe not get exploited with free labor.
Yeah.
So
no,
at least there's that. But Lloyd is a pioneer kind of, and I feel like John Waters is kind of like Lloyd Kaufman, who like went to art school and just met Divine, and like they just kind of come from like the same, they're cut from the same cloth, I guess.
Yes.
And in talking about this, the theme of sensationalizing filth, the Farrelly brothers definitely kind of took that. And Dan, to what you were saying before, I feel like A Dirty Shame is kind of, you're totally spot on. That always felt to me, I mean, Johnny Knoxville is in it. It's got Selma Blair with the big boobs and everything. It definitely felt a little different. I felt like Cecil B. Demented still had the John Waters heart to it a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I think it just felt darker to me than like going like Pecker. Even Serial Mom has like, they're very bright
fun
movies. Crybaby.
Crybaby,
they're bright, they're upbeat, and I felt Cecil B. Demented was like angry, which it's
totally
probably
angry.
Was. Yeah,
it's kind of like this. It's a similar type of version of like Pecker, where it's commenting about what is art, and who is to say what happened to like the quality work, and what's the purpose of it anymore. And it's a similar theme there. Cecil B. Demented, I think that for all of us, film nerds, that one was just like candy. Like dirty, greasy candy.
Crybaby was shot, some exteriors were at the high school in my town in Reisterstown, and then there's a quarry where they're swimming and the rope swinging. There's some scenes. That's at Milford Mill, which is an actual abandoned quarry that filled with water, and it's like a swim club where they did have pools, a few different pools, but then they had these platforms like 30 feet off the water with zip lines and rope swings, and then Tarzan ropes and a cliff you could jump off of. And when you would go there, people would always be like, they shot a lot of Crybaby here. And I was like too young to know what that was. But it's like going back and watching that, you're like, it's hard to make a movie. And now with technology, it's so easy. Like the fact that you can just go get an HD camera for pretty cheap and get editing software for free, and just you can make a movie. But these guys were setting up film cameras at places like Milford Mill Quarry, and having to deal with permitting and weather. So it's like they were true indie, I want to make films and show them for my friends, and they did it. And it's hard to replicate now because everything's just, you have access. You can just do it.
They got the guy from 21 Jump Street, and they're just like, we're making a fucking movie, and we're going guerrilla.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
My God.
Hey, Dan, when you and I were first talking about covering this movie, you told me that you have certain lines from Pecker that like are kind of always running through your mind. I'm curious to know what some of those are.
Well, not that they're always running through my mind, because one of them is just like teabagging is strictly prohibited here at the, there's that line. I remember yes, thank you. I remember making a mixtape back in like 99, 2000 for this. I was doing traveling children's theater, and we would just be in a van for
The
hours a
opposite
day.
of John Waters.
So I just made this. It smelled quite filthy, but it made these mixtapes, and I would like hook up like to my tape. I forget how I did it, but I had like movie clips playing like from the VCR to the
Pretty good.
Just because I was like, I need to get these movie clips on here because I'm constantly saying these lines to people and nobody hears them, and it's like I can't make it as like Martha Plimpton is just funny. You don't need context. You just laugh. So there's that one. All of Baltimore loves a pit beef sandwich. It's just like, full of grace.
It's a very quotable movie, and also the soundtrack of this movie is fantastic. It's just like a bunch of random country singers singing about Baltimore. It was so fun to go back and watch this movie because what I had remembered. It's funny what you remember. You know, it's funny. I probably saw it when it first came out, and it's like I remembered all the photography. I remember the laundromat. I remember going to New York. I remember the gallery show and like the speech afterwards. And then I didn't really, and the strip club stuff too, because when I saw it, I was like young. So to see like the lesbian strippers and then the gay strip clubs, but I had forgotten, I would say 70% of the movie. So it was so fun to see it again.
I feel like there were a lot of like shots in the movie that were just about as memorable as like a lot of the quotes. And they're just like meaningless shots, you know, when they're doing the shopping for others and Matt has the like preparation H and he kind of like rotates it in a tight shot. Like that, it was like, that's just burned in my brain.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh God, it's so good.
The preparation H was it. There's nothing wrong with my butt.
Shopping for other people. It's a fun gag. It's like a scene that doesn't need to be in any movie, but that's why it's so fun. It's just, it wouldn't be in another movie. It would get cut from a studio movie, and then you're like, yeah, leave it in. It's John Waters.
But it also answers the question for the people who are looking to poke holes in it of like, oh, that's how he affords all the film. Matt steals it for him. So at least there's that.
Yes.
So Scotty, you shared with us. Oh, Dan, go for it.
Sorry, one more line that I love to do is every now and again shout out and here's to the end of irony and to the end of irony.
Yeah, good line. Towards
just
the end
randomly
of the movie,
to
right?
the end of anything.
I think it's like the very last line or something. Yeah.
And to the end of irony. Yes, I loved that.
It's so funny, and I love the guy who the way he delivers it. It's pitch perfect.
Yeah. No, he's fantastic. He's the curator at the Whitney. So Scotty already shared with us kind of an idea of doing a bit of a series involving Pecker. Dan, what would you do to kind of like bring this back nowadays?
Oh man, yeah. I was definitely thinking about that and thinking about just kind of the changes, but also how a lot of kind of like Scotty, you were saying before, how a lot of people are now going back and going retro and like, you know, everyone loves vinyl and like you can buy Polaroid cameras and like my 9-year-old has a Polaroid camera. So thinking a sequel that picks up however many years later, I'm not doing math right now, but a sequel that picks up and kind of shows where everybody is. And I was thinking about like where they would fit in 2024, and I'm thinking Pecker's dad owns a dispensary now, and like maybe Pecker and Shelley are just in these jobs where they feel, you know, what are we doing, and they just decide to like give it all up and go
you
analog.
know, Shelley's still at the laundromat, you know that.
Shelley is probably still at or Shelley has her like a new laundromat. Like there is Shelley has innovated laundromats and has become like the
Uber for laundry or something.
Like the whatever, like the Martha Stewart of laundromats. Mm-hmm. And she has just brought into a whole, like she's got a chain of national franchise of laundromats. Like Lil Chrissy being, I mean, it's funny because I was reading an art dentist. Yeah. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Tina, I don't know what Tina's up to, but it's going to be great because she's Tina. So revisiting everybody and I mean, just like coming back to these characters, I think would be would be fun. I don't necessarily know how you would do it, and I don't see John Waters necessarily jumping to make a sequel to any of his work. The other thought that I had in not necessarily, because it is really hard to do his movies in any other way. And I know Hairspray became a musical, and that was probably the most flexible one. And Crybaby was a musical and not as successful as a stage show. But I would just love to see a movie about John Waters and about how he became the artist he became, and would love to see like what he went through trying to make Pink Flamingos. And I mean, like Divine, that could be an Oscar role for somebody there. So that's other than that, I like, because it's hard, because how do you have somebody who's not John Waters do John Waters?
Right.
It would be a
So it
cool
kind of
video
feels-
game too. I'm not a gamer, but I would be cool to be a character that you have to, like a peaceful video game, like sort of one of those games where you just kind of get lost in an immersive world. But if you could just walk around Baltimore and you had to snap certain photos of certain events happening at certain times and certain people, like I would get lost just walking around and being like, okay, you have to get a junkie who stole your dad's radio. So you just have to wander around till you see a guy with your dad's radio and snap a picture of him, and then that mission was completed. That'd be very peaceful.
Oh, well, that's a VR. That sounds like a great little VR thing. And you could
cool.
still call it you could still market it as a first-person shooter.
Yeah, that's true.
That's good.
The boss would be getting something through the tiny window at the pelt room.
Yeah, you have to get.
What if you have to shoplift?
You have to get full beaver or whatever. That'd be
You
great.
definitely have to do. Well, yeah, in order to replenish your supply of film, you have to do shopping for others. That's part of it. Yeah.
That would be great. And then when you wanted to like move on, you would have to go to John's house and drop off your film, and then you could like shut the game down. It would save all your progress. I mean, that seems like a game that I would play, like a Baltimore Mist.
Sure. Oh hell yeah!
That'd be.
It's
pretty
kind of
great.
it's kind of like the Spider-Man video games, because I think that in some of those you have to like take pictures because he's a
really
photojournalist. So it's kind of like Spider-Man, but it's Baltimore and you're completely on the ground and you're Edward Furlong.
That would be so nice. That would be such a peaceful game to walk around and just take photos of John Waters-esque things. You're like, hey, check off these 200 things. And you're like, okay, this is going to take me a year.
Yeah, I know. All right, so I had this idea, and Scotty, feel free to write this, or anybody out there who's listening who's a writer can write this. Okay, so it is a fantasy, I guess, kind of a Pleasantville-esque type of movie where somebody gets zapped into the world of John Waters' Baltimore, and it's. And similar to the video game, but like you're having to kind of navigate this world where it's like, oh shit, I'm in Pink Flamingos, and I'm with these people who are licking all this furniture, and there's some guy with a gaping asshole, and maybe you're swinging from ropes in the quarry with the Crybaby crew, and
the only
you
way
have to join the Cecil B. Demented crew to like make their film.
The only way you can get out of Pink Flamingos is to eat the turd.
Great.
Yeah.
Wow.
But, yeah, it's a journey through the mind and films of John Waters.
Call it Unpleasantville, and they would love it.
Unpleasantville.
They'd say, yeah, let's do it.
You nailed it right
fun.
there. Yeah.
It turns out the John Waters cinematic universe is very fun playground to have pretty much any media run through.
I think so. And, he hasn't... I mean, he's appeared in things more recently, and he, of course, does live appearances, but, he hasn't directed anything in a while, I believe. And
he's got...
I think that...
He published a novel. He
does a lot of
published
books.
A few books.
Right.
I read them all. They're great.
He's trying to get production off the ground of one of his novels, Liar Mouth. That's what I have. I mean, according
Which would be great.
According to Wikipedia, the most legitimate source for information on the internet, that is like his. If he's gonna have a next project, that's gonna be it.
Well, I would just hate for John Waters fandom to not exist in future generations. So I hope that his work lives on.
It's strange that nobody steps up and funds this movie. Like they make that's so strange to me that the people that he knows, that Leonardo DiCaprio's production company won't step up and give John Waters a $10 million budget to make this movie. And because if everybody goes, it's his last one, we're doing a limited release in 5 major cities, they would do great. Kill. Everybody would go.
Or even if it's straight to streaming, there's an audience for it.
Yeah, there's something else going on. I don't know what it is, because that seems so obvious. Just to make one more.
Yeah. Well, I want to get to what we're going to be talking about on our next episode, but before we do that, Scotty, I want to talk about some of the many things that you have going on, including your ambitions to pet 100 dogs this year and doing the Dry 69. Do you want to talk about some of those little wacky things you got going on?
Yeah. So So I have a podcast called Bananas. It's a strange news podcast with my best buddy,
This
Kurt.
is a seltzers. So, Dry 69ing over here.
With my best buddy, Kurt Brownoller, who's a great stand-up comedian and actor. And we like to insert absurdity into the world. So my New Year's resolutions this year, last year I tried to see a ghost. No, 2 years ago I tried to see a ghost, and I looked everywhere, and I stayed at 5 or 6 haunted hotels, and I really tried to see one, and I didn't see one. And maybe I was trying too hard. And then last year I wanted to go bobsledding, and I actually found an Olympic. I will be going bobsledding. I just didn't get it done in 1 year, and it's going to be in Salt Lake City, which will be great. But this year I had 2 that I wanted something that was a little easier than seeing a ghost or bobsledding. And so I pledged to pet 100 dogs, and we have a website called scottysgettinpettin.dog. I just pet one tonight named Allie. So I've done 10 in January.
Awesome.
And so I have 90 more dogs to pet. People in LA and in Southern California have been requesting me for come meet them at a coffee shop and pet their dog, or come to this brewery and there's going to be 6 dogs. So now I'm going to really start to stack some dogs and some pets up. And then the Dry 69 is everybody takes sober January, and I thought it'd be more interesting to go 69 days without drinking alcohol. So I made bumper stickers for anybody who take 69 days off consecutively from alcohol that say, I have mastered the Dry 69. And I've already mailed 3 because we had 3 pregnant women be like, well, I haven't had a drink in 5 months. I'm like, you know what? It counts.
Yeah.
Thank you for not drinking during your pregnancy.
They made that choice.
That's right. So
they're going to have that bumper sticker next to a baby on board sticker, and that's going to be worth it.
I know. And then last night I was at dinner, and I was explaining this to some people that hadn't heard of the Dry 69. And they were like, you should actually make bumper stickers too that say, I have failed to complete the Dry 69. And I was like, well, yeah, but the steps that it takes, what you want people is to read this in traffic and go, what? And then never think about it ever again. So I made 50. I know that at least 30 are on their way. And I hope if anybody wants to do the Dry 69, follow us at Bananas Podcast on Instagram, and I'll send you one.
And the Bananas Podcast, you have a new website, which looks great.
We do, bananaspodcast.com. And that was useful for we tour, which is nice. And you must have come to a show if you have a beer koozie, because I throw them at the live shows only.
Yeah, I came to one. I'm hoping to come. I don't know if it's sold out. The Portland show you just announced. I know Dan's in Seattle, and he said that the Seattle one sold out.
Yeah, we sell out pretty fast now, which is nice. And
Isn't that nuts?
It's nuts. We get 200 to 300. The Aladdin was sold out, so that was 430 or whatever. And so we are very fortunate that people like to be silly and want to come out and just have a good time and not hear about politics or guns or anything that just makes them feel like the world is ending. So that's sort of our specialty, the opposite.
No, Yeah, you guys are
We
so much
laugh
fun.
and laugh
It's the
and
best.
Laugh
Yes.
and laugh and laugh. Well, I'm sorry, Dan. We'll be back. But yeah, the Portland show at the Old Church is April 19th, I believe. And I think there are still some tickets available. Not sure.
Cool. I gotta check my calendar.
I was just thinking I might apply for a job at the venue and just see if I could kind of get in. Then I would quit after that night.
That's such a good
forget
idea.
your full-time job.
Come
Yeah.
on out.
I mean, they
that's
could pay
great.
me to see the show.
It's fine with
There
me.
you go.
Just bring a box of bananas and say you're with us, and then we'll toss them out at the beginning of the show.
If you walk confidently enough with a box of bananas, what are they gonna do?
Be like, hey, yeah, I think the act, like, they ordered these, and then just come backstage. I'm like, this guy's cool. He can stay.
Nice. Thank
Fine with
you.
me. Fine with me. I won't kick
place
you
that
out.
order.
Yeah, bananas is fun, but that's it. Yeah, the Dry 69 and petting 100 dogs this year, and everybody's like, those are rookie numbers or whatever people say online when they're pissed. And I'm like, well, I don't have to stop at 100. I could pet 1,000 dogs. You just got to have an attainable goal. That's what happiness is all about.
For sure.
So, yeah.
And then, of course, everybody needs to watch The Machine on Netflix. And I don't think that Ma is streaming anywhere now, so go buy it.
Oof.
And any Workaholics, any other shows that you've worked on.
Oh, yeah.
All of
Misery
them.
Index, Workaholics. But, they're
Who's
all
America?
fun. Who is America?
Yeah.
Bad Ideas is on Roku right now, and people seem to like that travel show. But yeah, is Ma not on Netflix? That'd be such a bummer if it wasn't.
I went to go watch it. It wasn't there. I know it was there recently.
It was crushing this fall. So maybe they'll just put it
I
out
think
every
'cause of
October.
Halloween.
And you know what?
Yeah.
Sounds good to me. I want people to feel like they missed out on it.
You have to wait for Mocktober.
There you
And
go.
my next movie, I can't talk about it too much, but this will really bring it on home for this podcast. Is I'm working on. It's already written, and it's Christina Ricci's directing her first movie, and it's my script, and it's a thriller. And that's probably all I can say about it, but we're going to shoot it this year, and it'll be out next year.
Shut up. That's amazing.
You heard it here first.
Yes, so
Probably.
the won't mentioned, probably rated R thriller, definitely thriller, is Christina and I have been talking for a year, and it's already, she loved the movie, and she's just so successful with Yellow Jackets and everything.
Yellow Jackets is so good.
Wednesday, yeah.
So,
Have-
but we're
have
going to
you
probably
guys
shoot
talked-
it next winter.
Have you guys talked about Pecker at all?
No, I haven't talked
No.
about the only way you advance in old Hollyweird is you just sit there and you're polite and you act like you're meeting them for the first time, and then later
Yeah,
when you become buds, you go.
Sure.
Pecker's one of my favorite.
I've also
movies.
heard that she doesn't necessarily speak about it so favorably. So
Well, she's cool.
maybe it's not her favorite subject, but
All I could say is she's like, when I first met her for this project, I was like, oh, she's exactly who I hope she'd be, and she's great. So it's that's
good.
pretty thrilling.
I've always thought that she was awesome.
She's the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything she's in. Everything she's in, she's great. So yeah, we'll I'll wait until the movie's shot, and then I'll be like, I really like Pecker. I thought you were great.
Give her a bottle of Zout. Tell her it gets rid of stains.
But yeah, bag
No
of
problem.
Utz potato chips, and be like, hey, I'm a fan. She'll be like, of that?
So Dan, on our next episode, we're traveling a little bit. Do you want to tell everyone what we're doing?
Yeah, we're heading up I-95 to Massachusetts, and we're going to get a little witchy with Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, directed by James Signorelli and starring the great Cassandra Peterson as Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, co-starring Edie McClurg.
Yeah.
That's going to be a good
So
one.
everybody give it a listen. So Scotty, what we do at the end of each episode, are you familiar with the movie Masters of the Universe with Dolph Lundgren?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
As a boy
if
in the
you're
80s,
familiar-
yes.
Yeah. So in that movie, they never say goodbye. They say good journey. So to the two of you, as you are traveling from the Whitney to come see a show at Pecker's Place, I wish you both a good journey.
And a good
journey.
journey to you, gentlemen. Thank you for having me. Long live
Thanks so much.
Maryland, and thanks for talking about Pecker with me.
Hell yeah.
Thanks for joining us.